Hey guys, how's everybody doing? I haven't done one of these in a long time, but I made it a point that when I came upon one, I would do it. If you go back and look at my videos, I have some videos called "A Boy Comes Home," and what that involves is when a service member from any war and any time is found and repatriated back. I read a little thing and about him, and so this is about First Lieutenant Thomas J. Redgate. Um, this is him right there. He gets out from under the brim of his U.S. military cap, preserved forever mid smile. Looking off to his left, a handsome young man from Brighton, who marched off to war in a cold, unforgiving, and faraway place, and never returned until now. At long last, the remains of Army First Lieutenant Thomas J. Redgate have come home, where his body was prayed for and incensed Friday morning at St. Ignatius Loyola Church in Chestnut Hill, and after a procession over Cape Canal, buried here at the Massachusetts National Cemetery. And that's where all the veterans are buried, and I have a couple of relatives buried there. He finally gets the military honors and the welcome home he deserves, said Kathleen Redgate, his niece, who lives in this Cape Cod town. It's bittersweet, agreed Andrew Redgate, Lieutenant Redgate's nephew. There are a couple of emotions. We're able to bring closure, but it's also sort of a celebration of sacrifice. And of a life not fully lived. Just 24 years old when he was killed in combat during the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir in North Korea in early December 1950, he had been reported as missing in action across the decades. His remains were not recovered at that time. In 2018, a U.S. and North Korea summit meeting led to the return of the remains of U.S. service members who were lost at the Chosin Reservoir. Using modern forensic techniques, analysts were able to identify his remains. They turned over those 55 boxes, and Uncle Tommy was in box 25, Andrew Redgate said. You'd hear stories about teams going into North Korea and looking for remains, and every so often they come up with some remains, and we always kept an interest. We thought maybe they'll find Uncle Tommy one day. Uncle Tommy, that's how they knew him, and they never forgot him. Stories about him became part of their family's history and lore. He loved life, Kathleen Redgate told me the other day. He wrote a letter home and he said he prayed the rosary to the troops, so he kept his faith when he was serving his country, and he shared it with his fellow troops. His mother expected a knock on the door one day for Tommy to walk in, Andrew Redgate said, but that never happened. Instead, his name was recorded on the courts of the missing at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu. I have been near the Punch Bowl. There next to others missing from the Korean War. And his memory became a live part of his family's personal history. We knew Uncle Tommy went off to war and he never came home, Andrew Redgate said. We knew he was a hero and it was a tragedy. We were proud of him, Kathleen Redgate added, proud of how he served our country and was a hero. My father said he had a fighting chance. It was just an ambush. The 1950 battle involved some 15,000 Allied ground troops. Most of them came from the 1st Marine Division and the Army 7th Infantry Division. Surrounded by some 120,000 Chinese, they suffered enormous casualties, including 3,000 deaths. Survivors had to fight their way out in a blizzard across 78 miles of unpaved roads. A yellow newspaper clipping noted that Redgrave was missing in Korea, where he had arrived on August 8, 1950. In a letter home in mid-November 1950, he provided details of his life in a war zone, chronicled in a careful ink pen script that had become a precious family heirloom. As you know, I spent a lot of time on a boat, he wrote. We came ashore on LSTs and since then have been doing nothing but moving all over the country. All we do is go into an area and set up and send a few men out to look the place over, and if we cannot find anything, we move on to someplace else. The only thing wrong with the whole setup is the cold and the living out in it. In one letter, he signed off this way: "Give my love to everyone, Tommy." Now that love is being returned by his family, who never forgot him. His family gathered on Friday to pay long overdue last respects. He gave the ultimate sacrifice, and my family feels that acutely, said Peter Bloniarts, a nephew who remembers the photograph his mother kept on her bedroom bureau of her youngest brother. He disappeared in early December 1950, and that cast a pall over Christmas every year. Bloniarts told me. My mother would have a mass for both my grandmother. Excuse me, guys. My mother would have a mass for both my grandmother, who lived with us at the end of her life, and they would have a mass remembering Tommy. He was always present with us. The identification was accomplished by using DNA from family members to compare with DNA from two of Lieutenant Redgate's remaining bones. It was like finding a needle in a haystack the way they break down the DNA, Kathleen said. It was like a process of elimination, and they were able to pair it with our father, and it was an exact match. I was stunned, said Andrew. I got off the phone, and I'm like, huh? What? And I had to step outside. I was speechless. It took a little while to process what had happened. So on a gray morning, it was time for a proper farewell for the young man from Brighton, who was a low-like student at Brighton High School, a member of St. Columcille's Church, and who attended social events at St. Gabriel's Monastery. At his funeral mass Friday, the spectacular church of wood and stone and stained glass, there were solemn prayers, word of remembrance, biblical readings, including one that read, "I have finished the race, I have kept the faith." There's so much we take for granted because of people like him, Andrew said. You have 25 million people in North Korea and the Republic of Korea who are now leading normal lives because of the sacrifice of thousands, including Uncle Tommy. He was buried with full military honors at the Massachusetts National Cemetery in Bourne. This is not our story, Andrew said. It's the story of 1,000 of other families who are still waiting for that box. At the National Massachusetts Cemetery, his flag draped casket was carried by a Ramrod Straight Honor Guard servicemen and servicewomen who saluted First Lieutenant Redgrave under a leaden September sky. There were volleys of rifle fire, and then the mournful strains of taps. Welcome home, Tom.